A poor farmer was just inspecting his field after a storm. But when he noticed a giant egg buried in the ground, his life changed forever. Scientists arrived, and when they saw what was inside, they couldn't hide their shock. Subscribe to the channel and comment which country you're watching from. The storm had been relentless through the night, pounding the fields with sheets of rain and rattling every loose board in the old farmhouse. When the morning sun finally broke through, it did so with a quiet gentleness that felt almost apologetic, as if nature itself regretted the damage it had caused. Michael Harper stood on his front porch for a long moment with a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, gazing over the land he had fought so hard to keep. The soaked earth glimmered beneath the new daylight, and the corn stalks drooped under the weight of water and broken stems. His breath lingered in the cool air, and his tired eyes followed the uneven path carved by the storm towards the dry creek that cut across the far edge of the farm. His boots were already muddy by the time he crossed the yard. Michael moved slowly, scanning for downed fence posts or debris that needed clearing. Every repair meant time, and time was something he never had enough of. Ever since the bank's final warning letter arrived 2 weeks earlier, the threat of losing the farm had felt like a hand wrapped tightly around his chest. If he didn't catch up on the overdue loan, the land that his father and grandfather had poured their lives into would no longer be theirs. He reached the creek bed, or what used to be one. Summers had turned the once steady stream into a thin drip of water that only hinted at its former vitality. Now, from the storm, there was a shallow trail of brown water crawling through the lowest points. Michael stepped closer to the bank and immediately noticed something unusual. The ground had eroded, peeling back a layer of soil the color of dark chocolate. Something shiny and curved protruded just a few inches above the mud, glistening where the sunlight struck it. He narrowed his eyes, leaning down with one hand braced on his knee. At first glance, he thought it might be an old piece of machinery lost to time. Farms were littered with such memories: rusted tractor parts, metal scraps that somehow made their way deep underground over decades. But this was different. For one, its surface wasn't rusted. It was smooth, polished even, like stone that had been shaped and cared for. The color was dark, but not like metal, more like the scales of a reptile. Michael set down his coffee and crouched fully, wiping away more dirt. The exposed portion was larger than he'd realized, far larger. He brushed harder, his gloved fingers tracing lines and ridges that felt purposeful rather than random. It resembled the shell of a tortoise, though thicker, tougher, and far bigger than any tortoise he had ever heard of. His heart kicked up a beat as excitement fought with unease. He felt suddenly aware of the silence around him, except for the quiet trickle of water and the sound of his own breathing. He wiped at his forehead despite the cool air. Fossils weren't unheard of in the Midwest, but they belonged to museums and deserts, to paleontologists and television documentaries. They did not belong to broke farmers who were one missed payment from losing everything. Still, the thought sparked wild possibilities. What if it was valuable? What if this, whatever it was, could turn their fate around? He stood and looked around quickly, almost paranoid that someone might be watching. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away, but he knew how gossip spread in small towns. He needed time. He needed to think. Without wasting another moment, he jogged back to the barn and grabbed an old tarp and a shovel. He hurried to cover the mysterious object, tugging the tarp tight around it as if shielding it from prying eyes. When he returned to the house, his boots tracked mud across the kitchen floor. Amanda turned from the stove with a raised brow. She was still in her robe, hair tied back, face drawn with the exhaustion of too many early mornings and too many late nights spent worrying. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, half teasing but half concerned. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again, searching for the right words. How did he explain something he barely understood? Finally, he took a breath and told her everything he had seen, every detail, from the smooth scales to its impossible size. Amanda listened quietly, her lips slowly parting in disbelief. When he finished, she folded her arms, trying to process. "Are you sure it's not just some old farm equipment? You know how much junk gets buried out there." "I've dug up a lot of junk in my life," he replied. "This isn't that." Chris, their 12-year-old son, burst into the room right then, with the boundless energy only kids possessed. "What isn't what?" he asked, grabbing a slice of toast before Amanda could remind him about manners. Michael hesitated only a moment before deciding his son should see it too. Maybe it would help convince Amanda that this was real. "Come with me," Michael said, and Chris immediately perked up, taking his father's invitation as a promise of something exciting. Amanda wasn't far behind them as they made their way across the property. The wet grass brushed against their pants, and Chris nearly slipped in the mud twice, laughing each time. But when Michael pulled back the tarp, laughter faded into awe. Chris dropped to his knees without hesitation, running his hand along the exposed surface, marveling at the patterns etched into the shell-like structure. "Whoa, Dad, what is it?" he breathed. Michael knelt beside him. "I don't know, but someone's gonna want to find out." Amanda crouched down too, though she kept a small distance from it, as if being too close might disturb something ancient and sacred. Her fear wasn't irrational. There was something imposing about the object's size, something that suggested great age and greater mystery. She chewed her lip, studying her husband's face before speaking. "If this is really as big as you're saying, what if it changes everything?" "That's what I'm hoping," he admitted quietly. Hope. It was something they were running dangerously low on. As they stood there, birds chirping and water dribbling nearby, Michael felt a chill that didn't come from the morning air. Excitement was only a part of what coursed through him. There was a subtle warning beating in his chest, a reminder that some discoveries brought more trouble than salvation. But as he looked at his wife and son, the two people he would do anything to protect, he found himself clinging tightly to the idea that this could be the miracle they needed. They walked back toward the house together, Michael glancing over his shoulder at the covered mound of earth. He didn't notice the way the curtains twitched in the window of a parked truck hidden by the orchard trees. He didn't see the figure watching through binoculars, observing the family and their secretive behavior. The man in the truck lowered the binoculars and picked up a phone, dialing a number without taking his eyes off the creek bed. "Yeah," he muttered once someone answered. "You're going to want to hear this. That farmer found something." Michael, unaware that his discovery had already drawn attention, returned to the normal chores of the day, though nothing felt normal anymore. Every clank of a tool, every gust of wind felt amplified by the weight of the secret lying under that tarp. The storm had left destruction in its wake, but it had also revealed something hidden, something ancient, something powerful. The balance of Michael Harper's life was shifting, though he could not yet see whether the shift would lead to salvation or ruin. Inside the farmhouse, the loan notice remained on the kitchen table beneath the salt shaker, a silent reminder that time was running out. But now, hope pressed against Michael's ribs stronger than fear. The farm had given him one last chance. What he did with it would change everything. Word traveled in Harper County the way wind traveled across the plains. Fast, invisible, yet impossible to stop once it began. By the next morning, Michael felt the shift in the air before he even understood what it meant. The quiet curiosity that filled him and his family the previous day was now laced with tension, as though the land itself sensed that something had awakened beneath its surface. He tried to go about his morning like always, stacking hay bales behind the barn and checking the livestock for any signs of illness, but nothing felt routine anymore. Every now and then, his gaze drifted toward the creek, toward the tarp that covered the impossible. Chris had begged him to uncover it again, just to look at it one more time, but Michael insisted they wait until he could reach someone who knew what they were dealing with. Amanda spent most of her morning inside on the phone, calling anyone she could think of who might connect them to a professional with real scientific knowledge. Every call was met with confusion, skepticism, or polite dismissal. No one believed that a struggling farmer had stumbled upon a prehistoric treasure right under his nose. Around lunchtime, an unexpected knock on the door interrupted Michael's thoughts. He wiped his hands on his jeans, confused. Visitors were rare, especially unannounced ones. When he opened the door, he found a sharply dressed older man standing on the doorstep, his shoes too polished for a farm, his tie perfectly straight, his silver slick hair untouched by the wind. The stranger smiled with a confidence Michael immediately distrusted. "Michael Harper, I presume," the man said, extending a hand. His voice was smooth, polished like the rest of him. "My name is Jonathan Grayson." Michael didn't accept the handshake right away. "Can I help you with something?" he asked warily. Grayson lowered his hand, unfazed by the hesitation. "I believe you can. I hear you've made quite the discovery on your property. Something rare." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. The tarp was hidden well. He'd made sure of it. How could this man already know? Grayson followed Michael's silence with a gentle laugh, as though amused by the farmer's confusion. "In small towns," he said, "news has a way of spreading, and I make a habit of staying informed, especially when those discoveries might have historical or financial significance." Michael shifted his stance, blocking the doorway a bit more. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, come now," Grayson replied, eyes narrowing with a patronizing kindness. "Let's not waste each other's time. I have a deep interest in antiquities and paleontology. If you found what I believe you have, I'd be willing to offer you a substantial sum in exchange for ownership. You would no longer have to worry about those loans or the difficulties of running a farm that, well, let's just say, isn't exactly thriving lately." He knew too much. Michael clenched his jaw, anger replacing fear. "I'm not selling," he said firmly. Grayson tilted his head, as though disappointed but not surprised. "You're making a very emotional decision about something you know nothing about. These things are delicate, dangerous even, if mishandled. Surely you would prefer it be studied properly, cared for by those with expertise instead of left buried in the mud." Still, Michael stood silent, unmoved. Grayson sighed and straightened his jacket. "I'll leave my card," he said, placing a sleek business card on the porch rail. "Think on it. I assure you, Mr. Harper, no one will offer you more than I can. And do consider the consequences of refusing help when it's right in front of you." He turned, walked to a black Cadillac parked at the end of the drive, and soon dust trailed behind him as the car disappeared down the road. Michael remained on the porch even after it was gone, staring at the card like it was a venomous snake. Amanda came to his side, worry etched into her face. What did he want? He wanted the find, Michael muttered. He knows about it. He knows everything, even about the loans. Amanda's hand touched his arm, tightening slightly. How? I don't know, but we need to be careful. For the rest of the day, Michael worked with a sense of urgency, checking locks on gates, reinforcing the barn door, even walking the perimeter of the farm with an old shotgun slung over his shoulder. He didn't want to frighten his family, but something about Grayson struck him as the kind of man who always got what he wanted, no matter the cost. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, the sound of a car engine slowed near their house. Michael rose immediately and peered through the window. A pickup truck sat idling on the shoulder of the road, its headlights off. A chill crawled down Michael's spine. Don't move, he whispered to Amanda and Chris, stepping outside, leaving the screen door shut behind him. He stared at the truck, waiting for someone to step out or drive away. Instead, the truck remained still, engine humming faintly. Michael's grip tightened around the shotgun. After a long moment, the headlights flicked on and the vehicle sped off, swallowed by the darkness of the rural road. He returned inside, pulse racing. Amanda watched him with wide, frightened eyes, and Chris sat frozen at the table, fork halfway to his mouth. They're watching us, Michael said simply. Amanda stood and wrapped her arms around herself. We have to notify someone. The sheriff, maybe? Michael's humorless laugh startled her. Sheriff Doyle plays golf with Grayson every Sunday. You think he'll believe us over him? Amanda looked down, knowing he was right. The night grew heavier with unease. Chris went to bed early, though Michael doubted he would sleep. He doubted any of them would. The house creaked and groaned as if the wooden beams themselves were aware of the danger creeping closer. Michael didn't go to bed at all. He stayed awake in his armchair, shotgun laid across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark silhouette of the barn through the window. Every rustle of leaves, every distant dog bark jolted his senses. He remembered the tarp over the object, imagined someone lifting it, stealing away the one chance they had left to save the farm. Sometime after midnight, when exhaustion finally began to weigh on his eyelids, Michael heard a soft crunch of footsteps outside, too close to be wildlife. He stood immediately, adrenaline erasing all fatigue. He slipped out the back door, moving silently across the yard. The moon cast only a faint glow, but he could make out a figure near the fence line, crouched low and creeping toward the creek. "Hey!" Michael shouted, raising the shotgun. The figure bolted, fast and agile, disappearing into the orchard before Michael could fire. He chased as far as he dared before stopping, chest pounding. Whoever it was, they were not just curious teenagers wandering the countryside. Someone wanted what lay under that earth badly enough to trespass in the dead of night. Michael returned to the house, shutting the door firmly behind him. Amanda was sitting on the stairs, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes. "It's going to get worse, isn't it?" she asked in a broken whisper, but Michael could not lie to her. "Yes," he said, "I think it will." She nodded, wiping her eyes and forcing strength back into her face. "Then we face it together." Michael took her in his arms, overwhelmed by her courage. He wished he could promise everything would be all right, but he wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. As the sky began to lighten hours later, Michael sat with the phone in his hand, staring at the card Grayson had left. The threat lingered beneath the man's offer. Sell now or suffer consequences. But Michael's soul rebelled against surrender. Whatever the giant shell was, it belonged to history, not to a greedy collector who saw it only as a means to more wealth. He dialed a number Amanda had found on the internet for a paleontology department at a state university. His voice was steady as he explained the situation. At first, met with disbelief, then curiosity, and finally a promise. They would send someone to investigate. After hanging up, Michael felt a flicker of hope. If real scientists came, maybe they could protect the site, confirm its significance, and shield the family from Grayson's influence. But hope was fragile in Harper County. Across town, in his marble-floored office, Jonathan Grayson swirled a glass of whiskey as one of his men relayed the previous night's failed attempt. Grayson stared out his window at the sun rising above his vast mining operations and smiled coldly. "Don't worry," he murmured, voice smooth as oil. "The farmer will crack. They always do. He'll come to me sooner or later." He took a sip, savoring the expensive burn. "And if he doesn't," he added, setting down the glass with a soft clink, "he'll discover what happens to those who stand in my way." The sun rose higher over the Harper farm, illuminating the fields, the weathered barn, and beneath the damp earth by the creek, a creature that had been buried for thousands of years. Its rediscovery should have been a triumph of knowledge, a reason for celebration. Instead, it was becoming a battleground. Michael knew one thing with certainty. The miracle they had found might also be the very thing that destroyed them. But he refused to let fear decide his fate. Whatever waited beneath the soil had been hidden long enough. The next morning arrived with a heaviness that clung to every breath inside the Harper household. They had endured a night filled with phantoms, shadows that moved where shadows shouldn't, engines that growled too close to their land, unseen eyes watching from the darkness. But morning brought more than light. It brought action. Michael stood at the window with a steaming mug of black coffee, watching the long stretch of road that led to town. Amanda moved quietly behind him, packing Chris's lunch for school, though both parents knew he would learn little today. Distraction was a powerful force, and Chris was completely consumed by the knowledge that a colossal mystery lay only a few hundred feet from his bedroom. Every noise from the outside made the boy spring toward the screen door, hoping, expecting, to see scientists in pressed khakis unloading crates of tools and equipment. To him, this discovery was pure magic. To Michael, it was a mix of hope and dread constantly wrestling within him. Around 9 o'clock, they finally saw a dust trail rising in the distance. A white university van approached, bouncing slightly on the uneven rural road. Chris burst out the door before the vehicle even came to a complete stop, but Michael called him back sharply. They couldn't afford to appear naive or desperate, even if they were. Two people stepped out of the van, a tall woman in her late 30s with a leather satchel, and a younger man carrying a metal case. The woman offered a warm smile the instant she spotted the family waiting near the porch. "Mr. Harper, I'm Dr. Emily Rogers," she said, extending a hand. This handshake Michael accepted. "And this is my assistant, Mark Lewis. We spoke yesterday." Michael nodded, swallowing the anxiety that had built up in his throat. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure anyone would believe me." "We get calls about dinosaur bones all the time," Emily replied, her smile widening. "Most turn out to be cattle remains or rocks shaped a little too interestingly, but something in your voice told me this was different." Amanda stepped forward, her polite but cautious expression mirroring her husband's. "It is different." "Well then," the paleontologist said, clapping her hands softly together, "let's see what you've got." The family led the pair across the field toward the creek. Chris bounced with every step, nearly tripping twice in his excitement. Michael tried not to let his own heart race, though every part of him silently begged the scientist to confirm what he desperately hoped. When they reached the tarp, Michael paused before lifting it. For a moment, he saw Amanda's hand brush lightly over his arm. Silent encouragement, silent fear. He pulled the tarp back. Sunlight glinted off the dark, smooth surface. Even covered in mud, the giant fragment demanded awe. Dr. Rogers crouched immediately, brushing away loose dirt with her bare hands. Mark opened his case and handed her a small brush and a metal probe. The only sound for several minutes was the careful scraping of dirt and the quiet hum of the creek nearby. Finally, Emily let out a low whistle. "Well, Mr. Harper, this is absolutely not farm equipment." Michael's lungs emptied of air all at once. "This is part of a carapace," she continued, eyes wide with excitement. "But not a turtle, and not just any ancient armadillo either. This is enormous, bigger than any specimen on record." "A carapace?" Amanda echoed, only vaguely familiar with the word. "The shell of a prehistoric mammal," Emily explained without looking up. "Think of a glyptodont, a giant, armored creature that lived thousands of years ago in the Americas. But this is a size we've only theorized." Chris let out a triumphant whoop that made Mark grin. "How much of it do you think is down there?" Michael asked, trying to keep calm. Emily tapped the curved surface, feeling for the continuation beneath the soil. "If our luck holds, a lot. Maybe an entire skeleton. We need permission to conduct proper excavations, of course, and—" A deep voice cut through her excitement. "What the hell is going on here?" Everyone turned sharply to see Sheriff Doyle standing a few paces away, hands on his belt, his badge glinting under the sun. His appearance was no coincidence. Grayson's influence was already making its presence known. "I was driving by," the sheriff continued, eyes narrowed. "Saw some suspicious vehicles parked near the creek." His stare lingered on the university van. "Care to explain what's happening on this property, Harper?" Michael stepped forward, posture stiffening. "This is private land, Sheriff. I invited them here. We found—" "I know what you found," Doyle interrupted. "Half the county's talking." His tone shifted darker. "And I'm here to ensure nothing illegal is happening. Any digging must be authorized. We can't have people tearing up land that might hold protected resources." Emily rose slowly, not intimidated. "Sheriff, we're from the state university. We're here to assess—" "And I'm telling you," Doyle snapped, turning on her, "no one touches the ground until proper paperwork is filed and approved. This isn't some sandbox for college kids." Michael felt his fists clench, anger burning beneath his skin. But Emily raised a hand slightly, calming the situation with her steady voice. "Of course, Sheriff. We'll follow all necessary procedures." Doyle scoffed, glaring at Michael. "Quite a mess you've started." With that, he turned and walked back toward his cruiser, though he threw one last look over his shoulder, like a wolf promising a return. The moment he left, tension crashed down on the group like a wave. "He's working for Grayson," Amanda whispered. "You saw it. You heard it." Emily placed a reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder. "This discovery is too important to bury or buy. I'll start the paperwork immediately, and I'll make sure the right people know what's at stake." They spent the rest of the afternoon taking photos, mapping the area, and collecting soil samples. Dr. Rogers documented every detail, her excitement growing with each measurement. She explained that if the creature was indeed a new or unknown species, it would rewrite parts of North American prehistoric history. It could become a national protected site, something that could bring recognition, visitors, funding, something that could save the Harper farm entirely. By the time the sun began to sink, the weight of the day settled deeper into everyone's bones. The scientists packed their tools, promising to return with a full team once permits were secured. Chris hugged Mark on impulse, which made everyone laugh despite the worry hanging overhead. When the van drove away, a quiet settled over the field once again. Inside, over a dinner barely touched, the Harpers discussed everything they had learned. Michael tried to focus on the positive. Scientists were involved now, real experts. The truth was finally being uncovered, but fear never fully left him. The knock at the door later that night only confirmed why. Amanda froze where she stood in the kitchen. Chris shrank behind her chair. Michael approached slowly, shotgun already in his hand. He opened the door to find a man dressed in a suit. Not Grayson, but one of his men. A thick envelope was shoved into Michael's chest. "Mr. Harper," the man said too calmly, "Mr. Grayson insists you reconsider his offer. This will be the last generous one." The man returned to his car without waiting for a response. Michael shut the door and locked it twice before opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a typed contract offering a sum of money that made his head spin. Amanda stared, stunned into silence. Chris stared too, though he didn't grasp the significance the same way his parents did. With one decision, their debt could disappear. Their struggles could end, their life could change forever. But so could their integrity. Michael crumpled the contract in his fist, feeling the anger burn hotter than temptation. Without a word, he walked to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. The paper curled inward, blackened at the edges, and disappeared into ash. Amanda stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He leaned back against her, letting her steady his spiraling thoughts. "He won't stop," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "He's going to make this harder." "I know," he repeated, "but we'll see this through." Michael turned and kissed her forehead. "We will." Outside, the wind howled across the open fields. The creek that had once been a source of calm now guarded a secret that threatened to tear the Harpers' lives apart. The giant shell beneath the soil, silent, ancient, had become the center of a storm far more dangerous than rain or wind. Michael looked out the window one last time before bed. At the creek, at the shadows, at the future that was forcing its way into their present. Whatever battle awaited them, it had already begun, and there was no turning back. The following days unfolded like a tightening vice. The more Michael tried to focus on the excitement the scientists had shown, the more the undercurrents of danger pressed against the edges of his life. Every waking moment seemed divided between hope for the future and fear that someone was lurking just beyond the fence line, waiting for the opportunity to rip it all away. Dr. Rogers called daily with updates about permits, university arrangements, and negotiations with county officials. Her voice carried optimism, but Michael heard the strain beneath it. Bureaucracy was slowing progress. Obstacles were appearing that had no logical explanation except purposeful interference. The sheriff suddenly required additional forms, geological surveys, and insurance that even the university found excessive. Someone was stacking the deck. Someone with power. By midweek, Grayson returned, this time with no polite veneer. His black Cadillac crunched over the gravel driveway like a predator stalking its prey. Michael was working near the barn when he heard the engine and straightened, pressing a hand to his lower back where the strain of heavy labor always lingered. He wiped the sweat from his brow as Grayson stepped out dressed in an immaculate suit, sunglasses shielding his eyes. The heat and dirt of the farm didn't dare touch him. "Mr. Harper," Grayson said with a smile that could cut glass, "I wanted to check in, make sure you've been thinking over my offer." Michael didn't bother responding. Silence was answer enough. Grayson's smile hardened. "You're making a mistake." "It's my land," Michael replied calmly, though his heart hammered harder than the words suggested. "And what's on it belongs here until real experts say otherwise." "Experts?" Grayson repeated, amused. "Do you imagine the state will let you keep a site of scientific significance? History belongs to the nation, Harper, not to a farmer with a mortgage he can't pay." Michael's jaw tightened as the insult hit its mark. Grayson took a few slow steps, surveying the fields as though evaluating property he already owned. "Let me rephrase," he said. "The discovery belongs to me. You just haven't accepted it yet." Michael stepped closer, eyes locked onto the collector. "You don't scare me." "Oh," Grayson sighed, "I do. You just haven't admitted it." He leaned in and whispered, "Yet?" For a long moment, the two men stared at one another, one made of greed, the other of unyielding resolve, until Grayson turned on his heel, returning to his car. Dust rose once more in his wake, swirling like a warning. That night, the Harpers slept poorly again. Michael tried to stay awake, but exhaustion eventually dragged him under. Dawn had barely touched the horizon when Chris's frantic shouts jolted him upright. "Dad! Mom! The barn!" Flames crackled against the morning sky, roaring up the wooden siding of the barn in greedy streaks of orange and black. Smoke billowed, thick and choking. Michael burst from the house in bare feet, sprinting toward the inferno. He didn't feel the stones cutting into his soles. All he could hear was the pounding of his heartbeat and the screams of terrified animals trapped inside. He grabbed a nearby hose, turned the nozzle, and cursed aloud. Nothing came out. The water to the barn had been cut. He ran around to the corral, desperately unbolting gates. Cows and horses stumbled out, panicked, trampling each other. Michael spotted a young calf frozen in fear near the flames. Without hesitation, he dashed back in, the heat like a wall pressing against him. He scooped the calf into his arms and pushed through the smoke until he collapsed on the grass, coughing and gasping for air. Amanda rushed out with Chris, both of them clutching wet towels over their faces. Fire engulfed the structure, tools melted, hay smoldered, collapsing beams crashed as if the barn itself was crying out in its final moments. Michael stared in horror as everything he'd built, repaired, and maintained burned away. The volunteer fire department eventually arrived, too late to save the structure. Sheriff Doyle, as always, came second, acting as though he were shocked by the tragedy. He offered thin condolences, barely hiding the satisfaction in his eyes. Michael recognized it. Grayson's message had been delivered loud and clear. After Doyle left, Dr. Rogers arrived with a grim look fixed to her face. She didn't ask what happened. One glance, and she knew. Tired, soot-covered, and furious, Michael led her to the creek. There, she found several stakes hammered into the ground and faint tire tracks near the water line. "They tried to dig it up," she whispered in disbelief. "They thought the fire would distract you long enough." Michael nodded, swallowing the rage boiling inside him. "When does it stop?" Amanda's voice broke as she joined them. "What do they want to do? Burn our house next?" Emily placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They're desperate because they know they're losing control." She knelt beside the exposed bit of shell, touching its ancient curvature with trembling fingers. "This isn't just a fossil. It's invaluable. It could be a new species. A discovery this extraordinary would change our understanding of prehistoric America. And it could save my family, Michael whispered. Emily turned toward him, eyes blazing with purpose. Then we'll fight for it. I'll get journalists out here. You won't have to face this alone. If Grayson wants a war, he's picked the wrong opponents. But Grayson wasn't finished tightening the noose. The first hit in the media arrived 2 days later, a local news article questioning whether Michael had faked the discovery for financial gain. On social media, comments quickly piled up, some mocking, some hostile, others suggesting he was trying to steal from the government. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Lies often traveled faster than facts. Amanda stopped reading the comments after the first few stung too deeply. She closed the laptop and pushed it away, trying to find strength in the one place she could, her family. Chris tried to help wherever he could, though he increasingly felt helpless. He spent more time near the creek, sometimes just sitting beside the earth where the shell lay hidden, talking to it as though it were an old friend. He wanted to protect it, too. He wanted to be brave like his father. But even he could not escape the shadow cast over their lives. One afternoon, as Michael and Emily were reviewing plans for scheduled excavations, Chris didn't return from school at the usual time. An hour passed. 2. By the third hour, Amanda was pacing the house, phone in hand, dialing anyone who might know something. Her voice cracked as panic rose, then headlights flashed in the driveway. Sheriff Doyle's cruiser rolled to a stop. Chris sat inside, shoulders hunched, tears streaking his cheeks. Michael rushed forward, fear turning to fury in an instant. What happened? Why's my son in the back of your car? Doyle exited the vehicle with exaggerated calm. Young Chris here was trespassing on private property owned by the Grayson Mining Company. He was found with a small metal trowel in his pocket. Attempting theft of mineral resources, it seems. That's insane, Michael shouted. He's a child. Children still break laws, Doyle replied coolly. Fortunately, Mr. Grayson decided not to press charges this time. He's a forgiven man after all. Michael clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles turned white. Amanda pulled Chris into her arms, sobbing quietly into his hair. Doyle stepped closer to Michael and lowered his voice to a sinister whisper. You're letting this fossil get to your head. Let it go, Harper. Sell it, before someone really gets hurt. Michael opened his mouth to respond, but the sheriff had already turned away. The cruiser door shut with a cold finality, and the car pulled out, leaving twin trails of dust that looked like scars upon the road. Michael stood frozen, staring into the distance long after the vehicle disappeared. When he finally turned back toward his family, he saw his fears reflected in Amanda's eyes. But he also saw resilience. He saw the same determination that pulsed through his own veins. He drew Chris into their embrace, holding him as if anchoring him to the ground. I'm so sorry, he whispered, voice trembling. I swear to you, I won't let them take anything else from us. Behind them, Dr. Rogers watched in silence, her expression shifting from sympathy to steel. The stakes had risen far beyond academic importance. A family's future, and a priceless piece of history, hung in a balance that could topple at any moment. As night fell, Michael walked out to the creek alone. He knelt beside the buried shell, placing his palm against the cool mound of earth above it. You've been hidden for thousands of years, he murmured. We won't let the wrong people claim you now. He didn't notice Amanda in the distance, watching quietly with tears on her cheeks. She admired his strength and feared his stubbornness in equal measure. She loved him fiercely, and that made the danger surrounding them feel even sharper. The stars above shimmered faintly, indifferent witnesses to the conflict below. Nature didn't choose sides, but Michael Harper had. He would fight, not because of the money, not even for the glory, but because the truth mattered, and because for the first time in his life, something bigger than all of them had chosen him. But as he rose and brushed dirt from his hands, a single thought struck him like a blow. This discovery could save them, or destroy them. And until the last secret beneath that shell came to light, they would not know which fate awaited them. The days that followed felt like living inside a tightening storm. Pressure surrounded the Harper family from every direction, and the lines between fear and resolve blurred so thoroughly that Michael sometimes wasn't sure which one was keeping him moving. Still, he carried on because there was no other choice left. The barn lay in a charred, skeletal ruin. The bank had sent another warning letter. Sheriff Doyle prowled the perimeter of their property like a wolf, circling wounded prey. And yet, underneath the broken remains of their quiet life, hope stubbornly pulsed. The earth still guarded the ancient secret that could change not only their own future, but the world's understanding of prehistory. Emily's paperwork and persistent calls finally produced results. The excavation permit was approved, not locally, where Grayson had influence, but directly through the state after she bypassed every corrupt channel Doyle and his allies had thrown up. The university's first excavation team arrived early one crisp morning in a convoy of trucks loaded with equipment. Scientists and graduate students stepped out into the field with a sense of awe, speaking in excited bursts about what this discovery could mean. The farm buzzed with an energy it had never known before, one that pushed back the dread lingering like smoke in the air. Michael observed everything closely, not from doubt, but from pride. This was his land, his discovery, his fight. Chris walked among the scientists like a miniature tour guide, proudly showing them where they should step and which part of the creek bed to avoid. Amanda offered coffee, water, sandwiches, anything to help these people who had chosen to stand by them against something powerful and cruel. The first layers of earth were removed with care, revealing more of the shining, curved shell. Gasps rose from the students when they realized how little of the creature they had truly seen the first time. The structure extended much deeper and farther than anyone initially expected. Emily knelt beside it, eyes wide, and gently brushed away dirt to reveal the continuation of armor plates, still nearly intact. "This is magnificent," she whispered. "Absolutely magnificent." The shell kept expanding, longer, wider, more complex than even Emily had predicted. What had looked like a large fragment before was slowly revealing itself as a nearly complete carapace belonging to a creature so massive it didn't seem real. Its layered armor was built not just for defense, but for survival in a world long vanished. Michael felt a swelling of pride mixed with disbelief as he watched the carapace stretch further across the trench. He was witnessing the slow unveiling of a giant whose bones had slept beneath his boots for thousands of years. This moment should have been filled with pure joy, but dread had not given up its hold. News crews swarmed the farm by the afternoon. Microphones were gently pointed toward Michael, Emily, and even Chris, though Michael insisted his son stay out of the spotlight as much as possible. He remembered too clearly the sheriff's smirk when he returned Chris home under false accusations. He would not allow his child to become a target again. Still, cameras rolled, and reporters from state news channels asked endless questions about scientific significance, about the threat of exploitation, about their conflict with Grayson. Emily handled most of the answers, gracefully protecting the family's privacy while making clear that this discovery belonged to history and science, not wealth or influence. As the sun began to set, the excavation team uncovered what they had been hoping to find: an enormous rib bone, perfectly aligned beneath the shell, the first undeniable proof of a fully preserved skeleton. The energy in the air spiked, students cheering and Emily letting out a breathless laugh before she turned toward Michael. "This isn't just important," she said, eyes glowing. "This is monumental. The largest glyptodont ever discovered, and maybe not even a glyptodont as we know them. This will reshape paleontology textbooks across the country." Michael felt tears sting his eyes, and he lowered his head to hide them. The moment overwhelmed him. After the threats, the fire, the humiliation, the fear, here was truth breaking free from the earth like a miracle. But miracles had a way of attracting danger. A loud voice echoed from the roadside, silencing the celebration in an instant. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Grayson stood there surrounded by men in suits, flanked by Sheriff Doyle and 2 deputies with holstered weapons. The air turned to ice. Every scientist, every reporter, every member of the Harper family froze in place. "You're trespassing, Grayson," Emily said sharply, stepping in front of the fossil as though her body alone could shield it. "No," he replied smoothly, "they are." He pointed at the excavation team. "This land is under legal dispute, and until that dispute is resolved, all activity must cease. Pack it up." Michael stormed forward, fists clenched, but Sheriff Doyle stepped between them with one hand casually resting on his holster. "You heard him," Doyle said. "This dig is over." "No," Michael's voice cracked with rage. "You can't do this. The state approved." "The county has jurisdiction," Doyle interrupted, "and I'm making the call as chief law enforcement here." Emily quickly pulled her phone from her pocket, dialing someone with trembling fingers. "I'm calling the Department of Natural Resources," she murmured. Michael heard the waver in her voice, and it only fueled his fury. Grayson tilted his head, smirking. "You see, Mr. Harper, this is exactly what I warned you about. You could have avoided all this. You still can." He produced another envelope from inside his jacket, holding it out toward Michael like a poisoned chalice. "My offer stands. But after today, the price drops." Michael didn't take the envelope, didn't even look at it. His voice came low and shaken. "You burned my barn. You tried to kidnap my son with trumped-up charges. You destroyed everything I've worked for." He lifted his chin, meeting Grayson's eyes without fear. "I'd rather lose every acre of this farm than sell to you." The smirk vanished. Something darker took its place. "That can be arranged," Grayson replied coldly. Reporters recorded every word. Cameras zoomed in on the standoff. Doyle glanced at them nervously, suddenly aware that the narrative was shifting on camera. Michael saw his chance. "You want the world to see what kind of man you are?" he shouted, turning toward the reporters. "Look closely. This man tried to steal a discovery that belongs to history. He tried to silence a family just because we aren't rich enough to fight back. But we're still here, and the truth is on our side." Reporters began firing questions toward Grayson instead. Doyle tried to wave them off, but the attention had already split. Admirers of justice always found a way to speak louder than corruption when given a microphone. Emily suddenly looked up from her phone, her voice breaking through the chaos with triumph. The Department of Natural Resources has issued an immediate protective order over the excavation site. This is now a federally protected dig under their authority. No interference allowed. Cheers erupted from reporters, from students, from Amanda and Chris, who clung to each other in relief. Grayson's face twisted with hatred as the tide turned against him. Doyle's hand fell away from his holster. The deputy shifted uneasily. Defeated for now, Grayson gave Michael one final look, one that promised the battle wasn't over, before turning sharply and retreating to his car. Engines roared, and the convoy sped away, their humiliation trailing behind them like smoke. Silence fell across the field, but it wasn't a silence of fear anymore. It was relief. It was victory. Emily turned to Michael, breathless. "You kept your ground." Michael wiped his eyes and laughed softly, though his voice shook. "We all did." Under the evening sky, the excavation lights buzzed and cast soft halos on the exposed bones. The ancient giant seemed to rest peacefully now, reassured by the presence of those who wanted to protect it. That night, after the news crews had left and the scientists finished securing the site, the Harper family returned to their home. The walls still smelled faintly of smoke from the barn fire, but hope, true hope, was stronger now than ash or fear. Chris hugged his father goodnight a little tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he whispered. "You're like the hero in those adventure books." Michael brushed a hand over his son's hair and kissed the top of his head. "I'm trying, buddy. I'm really trying." As the household quieted, Michael stepped outside one last time before sleep. The moon hung high, lighting the fields with a silver sheen. He looked toward the excavation, now guarded by temporary fencing and motion-activated lights. The secret he had found was no longer hidden. It belonged to the world now, but he still felt connected to it, as if fate had chosen him to unearth the past and protect it from those who sought to bury the truth forever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Grayson would surely return with another tactic. But tonight the giant slept safely. And so would Michael Harper, with a full heart, battle-tested spirit, and unbreakable family standing beside him. The war was far from over. But for the first time, the Harpers were winning. The world around the Harper farm changed faster than Michael could have imagined. It felt as though one stubborn discovery, dragged from the earth, had awakened a sleeping giant of attention that now refused to let go. Scientists continued working tirelessly under the protective authority granted by the state, and each day brought new revelations. The creature beneath the soil was not only the largest of its kind ever found, but a possible undiscovered branch of prehistoric evolution. Its massive rib cage, powerful legs, and armored tail told a story of resilience and might. A creature that once dominated the harsh landscapes long before humanity left footprints in the dust of the world. The farm, once a quiet place seldom visited by anyone other than the mailman and a few neighbors, now became the center of academic, media, and political fascination. Reporters returned often despite Michael's growing discomfort with the cameras. The story had spread beyond the state, then across the nation. Scientists flew in from across the country, from overseas even, hoping for a glimpse of the discovery. Interviews were requested daily, and although Michael tried to decline most of them, Emily insisted that their story needed to remain visible. The moment the public stopped caring, Grayson would strike again. But something critical had changed. People believed them now. People supported them. Letters arrived by the dozens, then by the hundreds, some with simple words of encouragement, others offering donations to support the excavation or help rebuild what the fire destroyed. Many said they saw in Michael's fight a reflection of their own struggles against systems rigged against ordinary people. Hope became something tangible, something that arrived in envelopes, phone calls, and the firm handshakes of strangers who drove miles just to tell Michael that he was doing the right thing. The state designated the site as a protected scientific area and granted the Harper family generous funding, not only for the excavation but also for rebuilding the barn and improving the farm's infrastructure. Officials from the Department of Natural Resources personally assured Michael that his role in the discovery would be publicly recognized and permanently recorded in scientific archives. For the first time in months, Amanda allowed herself to smile freely without forcing the expression past worry. But as the spotlight brightened, Michael learned that attention itself came with shadows. People who once ignored him now treated him like a hero. But there were others. People who resented his sudden importance, muttering that he didn't deserve success or respect. Some believed he was stealing from the government. Others claimed he was lying and controlling access to make money. Envy and bitterness spread like weeds in the corners of town where Grayson still whispered into ears. Despite everything, Michael held his head high and kept working. He helped the scientists dig, hauling equipment, building shade structures, even providing meals. It was his land, his discovery, and he wanted to honor every piece of ancient earth that protected the giant for millennia. As autumn neared, progress reached a point that allowed for more precise study of the bones. The excavation team erected a large, temporary shelter around the central skeleton to shield it from the elements. The structure looked almost like a cathedral rising out of the farmland, with beams forming protective arches overhead. Inside, floodlights illuminated the curves of the massive creature's armor as though awakening it from its eternal rest. Chris spent countless afternoons inside that shelter, assisting with small tasks the scientists trusted him with. Emily noticed his fascination and gently encouraged it, allowing him to observe the more intricate processes from a safe distance. The boy's eyes sparkled with curiosity every time he asked a question, which was nearly every minute, and his eagerness only grew as he learned more. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low enough to paint long shadows, Michael found Chris sitting cross-legged near the fossil, his notebook open across his knees. He was sketching the creature, his pencil strokes light but sure. "What do you have there?" Michael asked, settling down beside him. Chris looked up, cheeks glowing with pride. "I'm drawing what I think it looked like alive," he said. "Emily says I'm pretty accurate for someone who's not a paleontologist." Michael smiled softly. "She's right. You've got a good eye." Chris bit his lip, then looked at the fossil again. "Do you think I could be a paleontologist one day? Actually study stuff like this?" Michael's heart swelled in his chest. "I think you could be anything you want. You're already asking the right questions." The boy grinned before burying himself back in the notebook, and Michael had to look away for a moment to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. For so long, he and Amanda had been terrified that they would have nothing left to give their son, a future stolen by debt and misfortune. But now their boy dared to dream big. And those dreams didn't feel impossible anymore. Later that night, Michael and Amanda stood together on the porch. The farm lights cast warm halos across the fields, illuminating equipment and fencing and the silhouette of the shelter that housed the fossil. The barn reconstruction was almost finished, complete with modern safety measures and stronger beams. The road to recovery was still long, but the direction was finally forward. Amanda leaned against Michael, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. It feels like we have our life back, she murmured. Maybe even a better one, he replied, wrapping an arm around her. She nodded slowly. I just keep thinking, what if you had said yes to Grayson? What if we had sold it? Michael shook his head. Then we would have lost more than the fossil. We would have lost ourselves, our dignity, our story. And now? She asked. He looked out over the land, his land, not with fear, but with pride. Now we get to decide what comes next. In the following weeks, the protected site was officially designated as the Harper Paleontological Research Center. The state arranged ongoing funding and partnered with the university to build a small visitor center and outdoor educational area on a section of the property that wouldn't disrupt the continuing excavation. Emily oversaw the scientific leadership of the project, but ensured that Michael and his family retained a permanent and prominent role. Chris was named Honorary Junior Curator, a title that made him practically float with joy every time he heard it. Amanda took part in planning programs for local schools, determined that children like hers, children from working families in rural towns, would have access to the wonders of science. A grand opening ceremony was planned for spring. People from across the state were already reserving tours. The governor even hinted at attending, eager to celebrate a story that had captured national attention. Yet, even amid all the celebration, Michael remained cautious. He knew better than anyone that threats don't always vanish when light exposes them. They simply look for darker corners. Grayson's power had been wounded. His influence diminished further each day the Harpers' victory became more public. Word was spreading of ongoing federal investigations into his company's practices, including illegal mining operations and bribery attempts involving county officials. Sheriff Doyle had taken an extended leave of absence that nobody believed was voluntary. Still, Grayson himself hadn't appeared since the day he was forced from the excavation site. His absence unsettled Michael more than his presence ever did. Silence from a man like that wasn't peace. It was plotting. But then, sometimes, the darkest threats die quietly, consumed by their own failure. One evening in early winter, Emily received a call informing her that a federal indictment had been issued against Grayson and several of his associates. Arrest warrants had already been executed. His mining company would be taken over by the state pending further investigation. His grip on the county had officially snapped. When Michael heard the news, his knees nearly buckled beneath him. Amanda steadied him with tears already in her eyes, and Chris wrapped himself around his father in relief. Michael was too overwhelmed to speak at first, but when he finally found his voice, it was hushed, fragile like a candle flame. "It's over," he whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." But he was wrong. It wasn't over, not truly, because something new had begun. Months later, the cold gave way to warmer winds. Wildflowers dotted the edges of the fields again. The visitor center stood proudly beneath a bright blue sky, its walls covered with murals and photos from the excavation. Inside, display cases held fragments of the creature's armor and other ancient treasures unearthed by the scientists. People arrived by the busload to walk along the marked paths, listen to guided tours, and marvel at the colossal skeleton under the grand shelter. The Harper Farm, once just a place where crops struggled and bills collected in piles, had become a landmark of knowledge and inspiration. During a rare, quiet evening, Michael and Chris walked out together to the far end of the excavation, past the areas where public access was allowed. The place smelled of earth and possibility. The breeze carried distant laughter from the visitor center. Michael put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You proud of what we did?" he asked. Chris looked up at him, eyes shining. "Yeah. But I'm also wondering. He crouched and brushed away some loose soil near a marked grid. Beneath it, faint hints of something hard glimmered. What if there's more down there? What if we haven't found everything yet? Michael's heart swelled with the kind of wonder he hadn't felt since childhood. He knelt beside his son and pressed his palm against the ground. "There are always more stories to uncover," he said softly. "We just have to keep digging." The last rays of sunlight stretched across the field, touching the giant's uncovered bones like golden threads stitching past to present. The land whispered with secrets buried deep and dreams beginning to rise. Michael Harper closed his eyes and breathed in the promise of tomorrow. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Subscribe now and join the community that refuses to look away from the truth. Hit the bell, watch another shocking video right here, and share this one before anyone else finds out.